right, everybody, welcome. This is another episode of Citizen Central, one of my podcasts, this one monthly. A little bit of a different change from the normal YouTube content, but I like to host this every month and have a couple other creators from around Star Citizen come on and discuss some of the bigger topics going on. And with IAE just ending, now I think is a good time for us to talk about ships, the goods, the bads, what we hate, what we love, and how we as a community react to them. So I brought in some of the best. Honestly, everybody here making videos on YouTube or running streams that I really enjoy watching, and I think you guys all have something great to say. So I wanted to bring you together. We've got LokenPlays, Hybrid V Audio, TheSpaceCoder, and Loud Guns with us today. Thank you so much for joining. If you are sitting here live and watching the show, we've got a Q&A afterwards, so you'll be able to put some questions in for these folks and have them answer after we're done. And if you're watching this after the fact, make sure to leave a comment about what you like to hear. But let's get started off with you guys. Would love to hear a little bit more about your content, what you make, what you focus on, and just in general, why you decided to get into creation. We'll start with you, Loken.
All right, so to all those out there who already know me, hi, I'm LokenPlays. If you don't, it's a pleasure to meet you. So, I have been making Twitch streamed content for about 8 years. I got into Star Citizen and backed it at about 2015. Didn't start making content until 2018, 2019. Nowadays, it's become kind of the primary game I focus on because it's just this enormous, great, big, awesome adventure of just epic proportions. This game is everything I could possibly want from a sci-fi franchise game and beyond. When I'm not making content on Star Citizen, though, I am also doing variety stream. I tend to focus more on sci-fi. I tend to focus more on simulation and FPS shooters, but I'll cover anything that's really, super interesting and, takes my fancy. And more recently, I've started to do YouTube stuff now too. So I've been doing YouTube for just about nine-ish months, and the YouTube channel has definitely focused down on Star Citizen content again. That's me, and that's where you can find me.
A citizen to the core. Hybrid V Audio,
In
how
my,
about yourself?
Hey folks, Hybrid V. I do sound design both for games and for machinimas and whatnot. I'm kind of like where Loken is, where I started actually in Star Citizen, roughly around that 2015, 2016-ish time period. And I mostly just played the game. That was what I was mostly doing. And then I eventually jumped into actually doing machinima work. I did 2 machinimas, the Combined Arms machinima for Star Citizen, as well as the Letters from Vega series. So that's kind of where I got my start, so to speak, doing content for Star Citizen. And then eventually just moved on to converting my channel, which was originally my professional audio channel, to like a Star Citizen channel. And most recently, I just do like random content, whether it's just gameplay, tutorials. And the most recent thing I did, of course, was the Tail Gunner experience, where I kind of created the idea of what it would sound like if the audio simulation was turned off in Star Citizen. So it sounded more like a real space kind of gameplay. It just take out all the extra sounds and stuff like that and just feel the reverberations of the whole. Definitely should go check that out. It's a really cool video. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now, and I love making that type of content, and it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. I think the first video I saw from you was one of those, might have been early last year, where you were doing one of those re-sound design videos. It was really cool. I like that.
They're a lot of fun to make.
TheSpaceCoder, how about yourself?
Well, I figure I'm probably the least known person on here, I think. So I'm the Space Coder for all of you who don't know me. Those of you who know me, hey guys. And so what I mostly do in Star Citizen, I'm the guy behind the Star Citizen Armory, which is a tool that lets you build out loadouts for your characters for FPS, and it shows you the stats and where to buy and where to loot the items. And we also have pictures for some of them, but I'm working on that. And I also do YouTube videos. I do a lot of theory crafting, some tutorials, and some people say that I complain a lot. But in my opinion, I'm just putting my opinion as a project manager and a software developer. And I take that and I try to take a more critical look at how Star Citizen is developed and maybe what CAG could do a little bit better, what they are already doing well, and what they should probably stop doing. And that's me. And go use the Armory, people. Is going to save you a shit ton of time.
Yeah, he's doing the armory stuff. That means he's got his fingers in the code, looking at some of the secrets.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
He's in the
CAG doesn't
Matrix.
like it when you say that.
And Loud Guns, yourself.
Yeah, I've been making videos for a couple of years on YouTube. Mostly started as a way just to do mostly tutorial stuff. So it's more around the industrial side. Because I thought with a name like Loud Guns, I should really focus on mining and that sort of gameplay as opposed to shooting stuff. But it was mostly just a way to teach myself a new skill in lockdown.
Mhm.
Thought I'd learn to video edit. I'm still learning. But it's got marginally better over the last couple of years. So
It's a constant journey. It's the fun part about it. You're always learning some new things. Well, thank you all for joining me today. I actually want to ask, who is the newest and who's the oldest backer here? Just throw out the year that you backed real quick, and let's see.
So, I mean, I was 2015. So,
Yeah, me and Loken are the same. We're around that time. Yeah.
Let me check. But I think it's also 2015.
Okay.
I was 2014,
Okay.
but then it was
Oh, there you
5
go.
years till I had a computer good enough to play it. So I only really started playing in 2019.
Okay. But fairly, it sounds like everybody here is pretty much a veteran at this point. I mean, considering.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what I'm putting it.
I'm also 2014, so we've been here for a while, and I wanted to ask that because I think that the way that people view some of the topics we're going to talk today, ships, ship sales, concept ships, and even how these ships are made useful, changes a little bit based on how long you've been around and what you've seen.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get that sort of context out of the way. And for anybody who is like watching this and notices that I'm just straight holding my microphone, it's been a couple weeks since I've streamed. Hi, welcome back. We were in the middle of a move from Turkey back to the US, and we're going to be here until January, at which point we'll be heading back to Turkey. But for those of you who watch my stuff, you know that we're constantly moving around, and unfortunately, we forget a couple parts sometimes. So I just have to hold the microphone for today. Sorry if I make any extra noise there, but that's just a minor distraction. Let's get into the.
It's fine. We're gonna
topic.
freestyle this stream.
Yeah,
It's fine.
yeah. By
all-
by, I might just put the microphone down and let you guys do it on your own, anyways. But let's get into the actual topic of the day. So the first thing I wanted to ask was, before jumping into kind of the more obvious conversation, I wanted to just get your unbiased opinion on what the best part of Star Citizen is. What truly sets it apart from other space games or space sims? Anybody is free to start.
Okay. So, for me, it's unprecedented scope, scale, and detail. It's just those are the three things that come to my mind instantly when you say that or ask that question.
Yeah, yeah. The scope is pretty. It's
Yeah,
always very impressive.
I'll probably echo Loken on that. Definitely scope and scale, but also for the most part, the community is one of the biggest draws as well, because the community is at times can be, very critical, but at the same time incredibly helpful. We're back and forth, like we could end up being disagreeing on stuff, or we come across really cool stuff and share it. One of the coolest things I love seeing is when I pop into the game and I have chat open and somebody's like, how do I pull my landing gear up? How do I land? And like, there'll be like 30 messages in chat of just like how to do this, how to do that. Here, let me invite you, let me bring you in, and let's show you how to do it. Like, that's the coolest thing I love about the community.
Just N. Everybody's just N.
Yep,
Everybody's
yep,
N.
yep.
Like
I think I
similar-
would like echo what everyone said. Plus, in Star Citizen, if you ask, "Can I do X?" the answer is usually yes. With enough effort and determination, the answer is usually yes.
Can I salvage?
You
So
will
If
be
you are
able to.
Evocati, yes.
Soon.
Hashtag soon.
For me, it's definitely
Does
the
blowing up people count as salvage?
Yeah,
I don't know what you guys are complaining. I
Soon,
was
soon.
salvaging before we started.
for me it's the multiplayer. It's the fact that this game is designed in many ways to be a truly like multiplayer MMO.
Mhm.
No, I was looking for quite a long time. Like, it didn't even matter to me that it was space. It was just like I was looking for a game which actually put the multiplayer in an MMO, because so many MMOs at the moment feel like kind of a solo RPG that you play alongside other people.
Yeah.
Whereas this is
Yeah.
like you have to play with other people, which was what I was looking for quite a long time.
Something that scares some people. Some people don't want to have to play with other players, and I do think that Star Citizen has some responsibility to give those people a fun game experience. But I agree with you that this game is just better when you have other people around. not much you can do in the game, and already the amount of fun you have when you bring other people goes up quite a bit.
100%. 100%. It's a game that's always been designed to be, well, it feels like it's fundamentally designed to be an MMO. As you say, you can play it solo and you will be able to get an experience, but it's at its best when you're with a crew.
Yeah.
And you just shenanigans incur.
Yeah. So most of the answers seem to have sort of centered around the detail and the kind of joint experience that you get with other people, the community, and getting that kind of help and getting those experiences in multiplayer. And I think a lot of it ends up coming down to the topic at hand, which is the ships. You get to fly different places with other people in ships. You get to fly different places with people in other ships. You could do mining, combat, medical, cargo delivery, all these different things, and it generally tends to center around the ships. And we were talking about before the podcast how a lot of the focus people have right now is on the ships because the game itself kind of lacks some of the more immersive features that might take people's attention. Let's get more into that discussion. Does it feel like there is a lot of focus on the ships generally that are impressive or more interesting in the game? Like the Galaxy that just got introduced, the Carrack is a big one, the Corsair is another big one. You get these big, very interesting ships that are multiplayer focused that draw a lot of attention, as opposed to something like, say, a Cutter or a Pisces, which is a single person ship. Do you feel like those bigger ships take a higher percentage of the discussion than they need to? Or do you think that people are focusing on all of the ships pretty equally based on what they do for the game?
If I can sort of kick that particular conversation off, obviously it's quite a big multi-factored question. The answer I would give in that is I think that the ships in Star Citizen are always going to be a really, really big feature of the game, irrespective of when we get detail and the ability to homestead on planets and maybe make our home base on planets and engage in stuff that doesn't require us to always be moving around systems. It's fundamentally a space sci-fi game, and ships are such an evocative part of that experience in any sci-fi franchise, any media. You Star Wars, Star Trek, Firefly, Mass Effect. It's always like, what's one of the first things you think of? The ships. It just is what it is. So the big ships like the Galaxy, they are always going to, in my opinion at least, get a little bit more attention than, say, ships like the Cutter or the Aurora, stuff like that, because they're the hero ships, really, aren't they? They're the ones where you can get a crew together, where you can live your best sort of like sci-fi experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that a lot of people do give due credit to the smaller ships as well. A lot of praise has been levied that's recently at the Cutter, for example, for being effectively a near perfect starter ship at this point, and showcasing and highlighting just how far the ship team has come, but also how poor the Aurora and the Mustang are in comparison these days.
Yeah.
Let's really shine a bright light on that. So, but it depends on who you talk to, because obviously all of this team here are going to come from an experience of, we've been here 2014, 2015, we've seen this stuff develop. Somebody who's new, I don't know, you might get a different response. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you're right in terms of like why those bigger ships will steal that limelight. One thing I would love to see further down the line is people being a bit more attached to like their ship, their one that they share with their crew.
Yeah.
And I just think those bigger ships, they give you that bit more space to live out that life on with each other.
Yeah.
Whereas a Drake Cutter it's an amazing starter ship, and it's great for the single player if that's what you're doing. But for a lot of people, it will just be their starter ship is just what they use to get from A to B.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we're all hoping that you can customize your ship to a pretty significant extent in the interior, having maybe a different chair at that table than what came by default, or having something on the wall, or just little things here and there. And the bigger the ship is, the more you can customize those things and make them, like you said, something that people can feel a little more personal with.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I mean, I think it ties into the whole, multiplayer experience, like we mentioned in the previous question. is that those bigger ships give you that multiplayer experience. It gives you that community feeling. You're not really gonna get that with an Aurora or a Cutter or a Nomad. But yeah, the CIG kind of shot themselves in the foot with the Cutter, but we'll get to that.
We'll get to that. Yeah, the bigger ships do give you more of that freedom of multiplayer. And Hybrid, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think ultimately they do kind of take the show, so to speak, but I think for the most part it kind of depends on like what you actually fall in love with. So for example, like recently I've been like teaching my dad to play the game. He's a much older gentleman, of course, and he's not really a gamer, but he really likes the game itself. And he kind of was like looking at the different ships. He's like, I don't know which one to get. I was like, well, what do you want to do? He's like, I want to do combat. I just want to do dogfighting. I want to get some sticks, and I really want to get into it. I was like, well, there's a whole slew of them. You could start with like a Mustang or something like that. And he's like, no, I like this one. And he looked at the Avenger, and I was like, that's a pretty good pick. And since then, like in IAE, I took him around to look at all the ships. And he's like, I was like, well, asking, I was like, do you want anything that's new there? And he's like, I kind of really like my Avenger. And it's like at that point, like that's really like all that like kind of appealed to him. It's kind of like when you look at how people were like obsessed with the Carrack when they first like showed it years and years ago in concept, and people were just obsessed. They were creating models of it and just like fan art of it. And then it came out, and people still to this day are just like in love with it. Even some people even will go to the show floor, see on the show floor, and they're like, I have to have that ship. So well, yeah, it does take.
People.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like it does take a little bit of air from the room in some respects, but I think it really comes down to, in my opinion personally, like what you really fall in love with. Like what is the ship that kind of like really pokes out at you and really grabs you, and it's the one that's never gonna leave your fleet, so to speak. You know?
Yeah. And we're all kind of talking about them being these sort of hero characters, their own characters in the game, if you will. They're super central to the experience. But do you guys feel like the ships themselves are actually living up to that importance? I mean, they fund the whole game. They define the game for a lot of people. Do you feel like, and we can kind of ignore the fact that, say, the Mustang came out and it's at a different level of quality from the Cutter, right? The time difference that in the way these ships are created causes quality differences. But if we look at the newer ships that are coming out, do you feel like they're living up to how important they are for this game?
I'd say yeah. I really do think they are. I think that if we discuss this, we have to take into consideration the fact that right now we are only in one system. Right now, a lot of functionalities for a lot of ships aren't available. My Carrack, as a good example, has half its functionality offline. I can't deploy my modular cargo bay. I can't deploy my ablative armor. I have no drones. I have no stellar cartography.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely sure that in the future, when we have more of these systems online, the ships are going to just get better and better and better. And again, referencing the pipeline, of seeing where CIG has been with designing ships and where they are now, they just keep on getting better. So I'm personally of the opinion that, yeah, I think that they're living up to it. I think that they're delivering, and I think that they continue to excel. Personally.
Anybody else have something on that?
I think that covers it, actually.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's
No. It's well,
comprehensive.
I think it's that kind of opens up the discussion, because you start looking at how these ships, yes, they might live up to the importance that they hold, but then, like you said, it depends on when they start adding these features to the ships. So we could be looking at features like resource management, modularity, the fact that some of the ships carry others, physicalized damage, all these major systems that are supposed to make the ships feel a lot better in the future than they do now are kind of, they're a lot. And there's a lot of ships. Does that sort of question, is that daunting? Is that exciting? Are you looking forward to all these ships getting updated? Or are you kind of sitting there and thinking, how are they going to manage to keep all these ships up to date with these systems?
Oh,
I guess
that's a good question.
Yeah,
It's
it-
it's
yeah.
a problem of, like, in software development, it would be a similar problem to legacy code, right? Because technology develops and it moves forward at an amazing pace, and you have to keep updating the older stuff that you have to keep up and to make it work better.
Right.
And I think CIG is just going to be stuck in this loop of updating things. But eventually, I think once we hit gold standard on most things, I think we're going to be okay. They're going to be able to slow down. And then it's going to be more of a maintenance and balance kind of a situation. But I think we're very, very many years away from that. Until then,
Yeah.
it's just going to be this chase of the gold standard and updating everything. But that's actually not a bad thing on its own. And I think I'm going to steal the wind of one of the following questions, or at least my answer to it. So, as you're hiring new people, right? And some of these people at CIG are hiring have experience. They're hiring people who have been in the industry for years, but they're also hiring people who are new. And regardless of whether you're new or you have some experience with like being a game developer, you still need some sort of an introduction, some sort of a warm up into the project. You just can't jump in and build a character. You have
Yeah.
to do something small. And I think this is where a lot of the reworks are going to come in. A lot of the smaller ships, like the C8R, the new Pisces, I saw that I'm like, yeah, someone who just got hired did that. Because when you look at it, it's a Pisces. They just set them down to the computers. Like, here's a Pisces. Here's how you take it apart, and here's some medical room components from the character. Put it together. You have a week. Good luck.
Yeah.
And then they were just like,
No.
yeah, you know what? We're gonna put it in the live build. It's pretty nice.
I mean, it came out pretty nice. Gotta be honest.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
looks good.
And it's
no,
very obvious choice of a ship. I mean, is the Pisces just perfect for that?
Yeah.
That's great.
To kind of build on that point, to build on Coda's point there. Yeah, I think you're correct. And the more ships they add in, ultimately, the more work they're going to give themselves. The ships do fund the project. The ships are the most evocative part of the game, and as a result, I don't think they're going to stop bringing new concepts in anytime soon. Problem is, of course, is that they are going to, as a result, just create themselves a longer and longer lag period now to actually get all of those ships up to the standard. And I think that we will see them continuing to have to update and improve these legacy ships long into beta and probably maybe into release, because they're just going to have this list of work to do, and they'll get there eventually. But I just feel like there's going to be a lag period. I mean, we're already seeing it now, unless they suddenly hire tons more people and they start having a mega ship team. But I don't know how viable that is.
Yeah,
I
and
guess
that's
Let's be
that's-
realistic. Let's not expect CIG to do management well. Like, let's be
that's-
realistic here.
That's my big question, though. My big question is like, do you need all of the ships released into a platinum or Brillium standard, whatever you want to call it, for a 1.0, like for the game to go live? Like, I don't know. I just don't know if ships are necessarily the bottleneck that's preventing us getting Star Citizen 1 by a live playable release. And I just figure ships are an element of content which will probably get ships that are new concepted and released even after live. They'll come up with something new to add.
yeah.
And so it probably is going to be a bit of a hamster wheel. And probably after you have released and made money by selling Squadron 42, probably you can dynamically increase the size of your ship team.
Well, that's a very interesting point. The ships are super important. We've already defined it. The center of the game. A lot of people love them. They bring in the funding. They create a lot of the content. But honestly, at the end of the day, it's the features that really matter. It's the features that are really going to be the thing that brings people the excitement. And we talked about this a little bit beforehand. I'd love to get more into this conversation, but the features might start to distract people from the ships, because that's where the gameplay comes in. And right now, without a lot of features, without a lot of things to do, there's a lot of focus on every ship that comes out, what it can do, what are its specs, its hard points, can you fit a Pisces inside of it, all those kinds of things. They've talked a lot about adding just hundreds of jobs, as TheSpaceCoder kind of alluded to, and bringing in a lot more people over the next few years. What do you guys think? Like, just, I guess, theory craft a little bit for yourselves. Where do you see this company settling in terms of employee numbers? Let's say maybe while they're still kind of expanding and building everything out, and then when they drop into maintenance mode and only want the people who are, they can only afford a certain amount of people. Like, what numbers do you guys think?
So I mean, how many do they currently have? Is 800 or something?
It's around 800, I think. Yeah.
800, yeah. I don't think it's an unfair statement to say that they may get to 1.5k employees at peak. And obviously that is, again, it's very important to reiterate this is teams split between two different projects right now. It's not just Star Citizen, it's also Squadron 42. So, at their peak, I could see them getting that level of numbers, and looking at the amount of infrastructure investment that currently putting into new offices, new facilities, gargantuan new mocap rooms, etc. It seems like this is where they're aiming. And I mean, after Squadron comes out, which will inevitably come out before Star Citizen comes out, then they can consolidate the team, and you'll probably see again another huge spike in speed and efficiency on Star Citizen's you know uh, speed of development. Whether or not, I mean, those numbers will definitely go down after the 1.0 comes out. So what numbers? I couldn't say, if I'm honest. It won't obviously be 1.5k or something humongous like that,
Mhm.
but you still probably have a fairly large number of people on board, because irrespective if it's being developed or not, I can still see this game requiring lots and lots of post-release content and lots of updates, and it will. It's, for me at least, I think Star Citizen's always going to be being developed, and always going to have new things put in, and always have new ships maybe be added, and new concepts, and building on the foundations. So I don't think it'll ever be a small company.
Which is interesting. I just did a quick Google search to see, just offhand, kind of what people are saying in terms of the crew that runs something like World of Warcraft. And I mean, I don't know how close these numbers are to true. These are old numbers from 6, 7 years ago, but people are estimating anywhere around 300 people. And that kind of crew size is vastly different from what we see in Star Citizen now. Star
Mm.
Citizen obviously is coming from a studio that is trying to build up the studio, trying to make different games, trying to build a game engine. It's not an apples to apples comparison, but it does kind of put into perspective that if they're looking to try and get up to 1,200 people in the next couple of years, this is like a different scale.
Yeah.
I suppose with World of Warcraft, you've got the fact that it comes from an established studio, though.
Yeah.
So you probably, because it's Activision Blizzard, they probably wouldn't necessarily count marketing in World of Warcraft, because they probably have an overarching team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Comes
I
down
think-
to how successful it is, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, and
How much ongoing success can you generate? And
it's
I
a
mean, there's
hard
two
discussion
things
to
that
have.
we know here, right?
Sure.
We know that CIG has the money to get pretty much as many people as they want. Like, the money's not going to dry out for the next couple of years. Come on, guys. We're $500 million in. Like, we're good.
We keep exceeding goals and targets
Yes.
in last year's totals.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and I think last time I checked, CIG had like over 100 open positions, and that was like 6 months ago when I was looking for a new job. so that number may have changed. They still haven't hired me, by the way. Very, very not nice of them.
Rude.
Yeah,
Exactly,
very rude.
rude.
I keep sending them reports of how their data is, and they keep ignoring me.
I'm sure that's a good way to get hired.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Hey, like if you guys like, all I want is for them to fix their naming standards. That's all I want. Just have one, not 6 of them, please. It's gonna make my job a little easier. Anyway, so I think they will settle at a pretty high number. Like, I think someone pointed out that the number for Blizzard is just devs. I think the whole company is much more people. I think CIG is gonna settle under 2,000 for like the peak of development, and then they're gonna not necessarily lay off people, but I think a lot of people are going to leave for projects that are in development, because when you're a software or a game developer, you want to be working on things that are going to be released, so your name's going to be on the release because that just looks better on your resume. A lot of people are not going to want to stay that long,
Mhm.
and I think they're going to end up with a. Because I agree, Star Citizen is going to keep getting developed for years on end. Like this game is going to outlive all of us. So I think they're going to probably settle around 1,000 long term, and maybe half of that is going to be like development, like production, and the rest of it is just going to be support, moderators, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Mm.
But we will
Yep.
see. I think they have a budget to maintain it, and they have, I think the capacity of the offices they have, it's possibly up to 3,000 people since they have a bunch of new offices now and the new studio.
Jeez,
So yeah,
it'd be a lot.
they poured a lot of money into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and as somebody pointed out in the chat, the numbers the numbers I pulled up for World of Warcraft were the devs on the game as opposed to the employees in the whole company. And I think CIG, most of their employees are focused on Squadron 42 or Star Citizen, and not like 6 other games that they're building out like Activision Blizzard would be. But it does, I think, still just the difference in scale. There's something to be said about that. And Space Coder, you are alluding to some pretty big numbers when it comes to the actual development going into the game. Right now, we've got, I think I got this numbers over here. We've got about 69 unique flyable ships if the Vulture comes out. Nice. And
Nice.
total of looks like about 123. Now this is including different variants and stuff, but it's a decent amount of ships, and I think that's probably going to double. I would say at some
Yeah.
point we're going to see a lot of ships, but in the long term, do you think that they should be putting more developers towards ships or features? And I know that's kind of tough to answer because there's a little bit of crossover in the way that features work with ships. Like, you build out a ship, technically resource management is a feature that's included in that ship. So I know that's hard to answer, but how do you think they should be balancing their development time?
I mean, I think that it's important to state that some out there may not be as aware of how development works inside of a company like any games company. The people who are making the ships won't necessarily be the people who are working on features, and
Sure.
there is a massive delineation between those. So, it's not like the whole company's focused on this one ship, and as a result, they're not working on the feature you care about. No,
Yeah.
no, there are separate teams doing separate things simultaneously. That said, I think in the short to mid-term, you're going to see a lot of massive crossover because a lot of these fundamental features are necessary to make ship stuff work. But I would like to see a bigger bias personally in getting the actual core features and the core gameplay loops that we are missing or are still on the drawing board actually put into the game and starting to be actually tested by alpha backers and Evocati in that, because I think it's important. And also a lot of those will start to inadvertently affect how ships operate, and maybe there will be unforeseen changes that need to occur just because the testers have found X, Y, and Z, and oh, okay, maybe this ship would be better to do this, or maybe we need a ship for this that we didn't even realize needed to exist.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And we see
I would
that.
like to see there being a tilt and a bias toward gameplay at this point and gameplay features.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, and I think like gameplay features would actually ironically make people buy more ships.
Yeah.
Probably.
I personally I dipped into my store credit and bought myself a Vulture at IAE, but the reason I bought it was because barring
useful.
something somehow going wrong, I'm actually going to be able to test out a gameplay loop with it.
Yeah.
And if there was no news about salvage, I wouldn't have bought that Vulture. So I think just getting some features out will actually push the ship sales maybe more than a new concept ship.
I agree. I
Yeah, I think the question forgets one very important part.
Sure.
It's not just features and ships. There is also a big, big, big core tech pillar to this whole thing. And that is the most important part. Because that's what server meshing is hanging on. That's what all the refactors are hanging on. Maybe some of you guys remember the client server actor refactor that was on the roadmap like 2 years ago and then
Yep.
disappeared. The thing that was going to fix everything. Yeah, that's one of those. Still waiting for that one because it was probably going to fix a lot of things. So that's the
Probably.
big thing.
Yeah.
And then you have to come at the part where ship developers and feature developers and all sorts of different teams, because we have like generalizing it into features, ships, and core tech is very, very broad, and there are a lot of teams under each of those, and some of the roles in those teams have overlap, but most of them don't. So you're gonna have to hire engine developers to do some of the core tech, but you also need people who do economy, who do finance type of stuff for the for the economy, for quantum that we're gonna have. Like not much to do with game development. That's mostly statistics and economy in there. So there's lots of things, and I think the focus should probably be for the core tech to be ready, because off of that we're gonna build up better features and better ships, and I think that's where a lot of blockers lie at the moment. But the problem there is that it's very, very difficult to hire people for those core roles, because you need very, very experienced people, very, very good developers to make something that's going to work at the scale of Star Citizen, and it's also going to scale with the game as we bring on server meshing and we have more server shards and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's a good point, the core tech versus the features. I usually try and put that into the feature section, but like you said, it's almost its entirely own segment with things like Gen 12 and server meshing and PES and things like that. Going back to what you had said, Loud Guns, about the ship actually having use and features that support it, and that causing more people to be interested in it, I think is something that, while a lot of the increase was the pandemic we saw in 2020, almost everybody who's following this game very closely knows that the funding for this game took off in 2020 and continued into 2021, and now, as we've seen, in 2022. And I think a lot of that is because the game became much more playable. Persistence started to step in, frame rates got a little bit better, more gameplay was available, and people just had a better time with each other. I think that did help people start spending more money on ships they wouldn't have gotten. And like you said with the Vulture, I think that when they release a ship that has actual features that look like it'll support it, it'll do a lot better. Case in point, I think the what is it called? I think the Legionnaire is the hacking ship they released.
Yeah.
The
The
concept.
boarding one, yeah.
That one was weird and kind of frustrating, because we all knew hacking was on the roadmap and it was planned to be released around that time. And then, instead of getting hacking or even an idea of hacking in the game, we got a concept ship, which I think was probably not a great idea. And
The thing that surprised me about the Legionnaire was like, oh, it hacks docking ports, but docking
Shouldn't
only works on 3 ships.
I mean, I was kind of thinking, like, shouldn't we just be able to hack docking ports from like a hacking console and not necessarily a specific ship? But
Yeah.
again, indicative of selling a ship versus using features to sell ships. I think if they had sold actual hacking at that time, or not sold it, but a released hacking, and then said, here's the Legionnaire as well, they would have sold way more.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I sort of think with that's the key. It's the concept ships where you've got no idea at all about what the gameplay is going to look like. So even something like the Orion, I know that the mining isn't going to be. We haven't seen the type of mining the Orion's going to do.
Right.
But I have at the very least, seen that CIG are capable of producing a mining game loop that I enjoy.
Yeah.
And so I can put a bit of faith in them. And if I want to back the game, and if somebody wanted to spend that money, you've got some grounds to put a bit of faith in.
Mm-hmm.
But something like hacking or modularity, which you've seen none of, it's harder to.
I mean, there is some reason behind pushing out new ship concepts, besides having some training area for new hires. So a lot of manufacturers, or some of the manufacturers in Star Citizen right now, don't have completely defined design language. Like, let's look at RSI. RSI has been around forever. It was the first ship ever developed. And you look at, the Aurora and the Connie, and now you look at the Galaxy, or you look at the what was the other one that was
Perseus?
new, the Perseus. Yeah, like those are. It looks like 2 different manufacturers.
Yeah.
And you basically need those ships in between to define that design language. For like, Anvil also doesn't have any large ships, actually, beside the Carrack. So they will need some stepping stones in between before they can build out the bigger things. Same with Drake, for example. Drake only has the Caterpillar, which is also very, very old. So how do we expect them to build out the Kraken? And now comes the community's favorite, the Merchantman. They're never going to be able to build that, because the Banu design language doesn't exist. There is, one Banu ship right now? The Defender?
The Defender.
That's it.
Yeah. That's kind of.
And you can't take a 2-seater fighter and just kind of take the knowledge that you gained in a relatively small project, let's call it, and build a capital ship out of that. You just can't. You're gonna hit too many issues. You're gonna spend way too much time. You're probably better off, building out a medium cargo ship or like a medium gunship or something like that. That's gonna have the design language. You're gonna refine it. Then you can come back to the bigger stuff. So I think that's one of the main reasons we're releasing new concepts. But we're gonna get to that. I have more comments on how CIG does concept, but I don't want to derail us right at the start.
That's fair. I think there's space. Let's talk about concept ships and how we feel about them. I mean, obviously, they need to be selling concept ships to fund the game. But there's a difference, I think, especially what Loud Guns kind of got at was the difference between selling the concept ships that are very much predictable, that we can look at them and be like, okay, I have faith. I know what's going to happen with that ship. I know that Spirit's going to come out and it's going to be basically kind of like a 400i, at least a C1, or like a Corsair. It's my general cargo hauling small ship. But then they release something like, say, I don't know, a crack or a Pioneer, let's say, and you just don't know what's going to happen there. How do you feel about those two concept ship releases? Do those come off differently to you, or are you just kind of like, you know what, concept ship, funding the game, whatever you need to do?
It depends on so many circumstantial things and the person in question. I think it's quite a personal choice. Personally, for me, I don't like backing something if I don't understand its core gameplay. And I've looked at the Pioneer every year and thought, this thing could be awesome. But I don't know what it's going to do, and I don't know if the gameplay is interesting, and it's very expensive, so I'm going to not. Whereas, something like the Spirit, it was a pretty easy win for me. I was like, yeah, the Spirit, okay, it's filling a gap in the market, the freelancer cut the style size ship for Crusader. I know what's going to do. I've got a good idea. Yeah, sure, let's go for it.
Mhm.
And I'm a person who, I need a little bit of understanding of what something's gonna how it's gonna play if I'm gonna put any money toward it. Especially as a lot of concepts are significant cash investment. I mean, even the smaller ones are still fairly significant.
Yeah, it's like a full video game, even for the
Yeah.
smallest
Yeah.
of ships.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head there. With the like, the Spirit is so easy. Like, you can look at it and go, okay, that's basically Crusader Industries' version of a Cutlass. But when you look at the Pioneer, you're like, well, what's analogous to it? We don't really have anything in game that's anywhere near that. And so it kind of leaves a lot in the air. It leaves a room open for theory crafting, which then excites people and gets the hype going, which is a whole nother topic of its own. But it still makes it kind of hard to figure out what exactly that role is going to be. We know it's a base builder. We don't have any base builders in the game. We don't know how base building is going to work. We have seen them work on like the outposts and stuff and the prefabs, but we don't know what the gameplay looks like. We haven't really seen the documentation or even demonstrations. We've only just seen what is essentially the works in progress and even some final art stuff.
Yeah.
But how does it do it? We don't know.
Like, we don't actually have to even look as far as the Pioneer. Also, Loken, is that your ship sale emotional support cat?
She is. He's actually in charge of the situation. I'm just the human meat puppet that speaks on my
Yes.
behalf.
Behind every great content creator, there's a cat.
Sorry, the cat.
He's being particularly needy
That's my
right now.
mistake. Yeah, but we don't even have to look at the Pioneer or the Merchantman or any of the big concepts. Actually, look at the Vulcan. It's a small concept. What was it, like $200?
What the Vulcan?
And we don't know what it's gonna do. Well, we know what it's gonna do, but we don't know how. We don't have the tech. And here's the thing that I don't like about concept sales. They throw out a bunch of PNGs, and they say like, this is roughly what it's gonna do, and this is like the manufacturer blurb for it. And here are some stats that the artist team threw together with based on an email with the vehicle team. And then a couple months later, when it actually goes into development, they will go like, "Oh, well, it went into white box and it didn't quite work, so we had to change some stuff." See the Karak, where it was a nice little skinny thingy, and then it was a big chunk when it came out.
Yeah, or the MSR.
And everybody got upset. So I think what CIG could do, rather than be like, "Oh, here's a concept, $200," please and thank you, with LTI war bond. So what they could do instead is be like, hey, here's a concept, here's some ship that we're working on, here's, I don't know, half a page, 2 paragraphs of what they do, and then just be quiet like they usually are. And then when they're like, okay, it went through white box, here's some interior layouts, here's more defined stats because we already modeled it, here's a price tag, here's the LTI, here's the war bond. Thank you, have a nice day. And I think that would maybe cost them a little bit of money. Let's be honest, it would probably few less people would buy the ship.
Yeah.
But it would save an awful lot of drama, which I
Yeah.
think is ultimately the better choice. Because, like, come on, they got all the money in the world. They don't need the drama right now.
They could dodge a lot of drama. Yeah, I think we had an episode about this earlier, just really on communication, in that a lot of the things that they're doing that put people off in terms of the concept sales or how they do them, like you're saying, SpaceCoder, it's small changes, small shifts in when they let us know about things or why, I think would go a long way towards not having a community that is constantly whipped around from overhyped frenzy to a very angry month. And, I don't think that anything that we're talking about applies to a majority of the community. I think
Man, I just
sitting
want
here-
them to proofread their sales pages.
Yes.
That's all I
Oh
want.
God, yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, that
Like,
would
what was it with the Galaxy with the hanger size? What was like the 3rd or 4th time they screwed up?
Yeah.
Like within 1 quarter?
I think I had heard that the hangers was listed as too small or something.
It was
The
too
hanger was
big,
listed
and
as
they
too
made it
big.
smaller.
Yeah, so the hanger was listed as being the Odyssey size, so extra small, and in actuality it's XX small, so snub nose effectively, which is
Okay.
quite a big scale difference.
Yeah, that's something else that happened with the Spirit. I think there was like a
Yeah, I think it had too many
some-
weapons on it, and one variant had too many cannons, I think, and they were a size bigger than they actually were.
I can't remember what it was,
Yeah,
but yeah,
something
there
like
are
that.
some things, because I was gonna say, Coder, they've gotten better about the whole concepting it out to be a little bit more realistic to what they would have to do with the game, like since the time of the character, the MSR. But they're still making mistakes like that. That just, it's the little things.
I guess when people do ask those questions, like, should I buy, which I personally hate answering.
Yeah.
But like the one thing that I will say is just wait for the Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, wait for it to be in game.
Absolutely. But if this person is desperate, they've seen, and I personally think like the best way to buy ships is rule of cool. If you see something that you think is really cool, you're probably less likely to be disappointed by it if it turns out to get a bit of a tweak or a nerf or whatever.
Yeah,
But just at least wait for the Q&A.
yeah.
And for the iron out.
I've realized over the last couple of years that I am looking at ships much more in terms of like, what kind of experience will I get from that, as opposed to, can I defend myself? Can I shoot this? Can I carry this much cargo or this vehicle? The vehicle thing is kind of important, but I realize more and more as more ships come out that I'm just kind of, I'm here for the experience and not so much of the min-maxing. And I think that takes a lot of that pressure off of just picking the right ship,
Absolutely.
I think when I picked up the Spirit, it was like, I think because during CitizenCon, I was also on vacation and I was tripping balls the whole time. And then I saw the concept sale for the Spirit, and I'm like, shiny. All right, where's my credit card? And that was it. That was my decision.
I saw the first picture of that thing, and I was like, "Oh, that is beautiful."
Yeah, it's a
okay,
beautiful ship.
all right,
That is
Really
spicy.
is. Yeah,
I am gonna have to go and buy this now.
love it.
Thank
I
you,
love
TRG.
the
Yeah.
Mass Effect vibes from that one.
Oh yeah, absolutely, dude.
I'm sure Hybrid does too. I think I saw somebody call out the Slack, the hoodie.
Yep. Got a rep.
So, a little bit of a change of question. What is a ship release that we've seen recently? Could be concept sale, could be straight to flyable, could be something that was, in production already. But what is a ship unveiling that they've given to us that you think was a success? And what is one that you think was a failure? Just in the last couple of years that you really gravitated towards?
Oh, the Cutter. I mean, come on. The Cutter was an absolute success. At least in my opinion, it was. I mean, I imagine everybody here has somewhat similar opinions. But in terms of failure, though, I personally love the Reliant series, but that ship has so many problems and it's missing so many gameplay features. And in my opinion, that was probably one of the ones that one of the bigger failures, I think, in terms of like ships that were released and that were put out there. Um, hey, maybe that'll change later when they improve on that, but like that ship has just like so many problems, so many tech issues with it. It was supposed to be like the cool idea of like what MISC was supposed to be with the Xi'an
Yeah.
and human tech and the transformations and stuff like that. And then the ships after that kind of don't really seem to follow that anymore. It's kind of weird. Even the Freelancer is kind of losing its weird articulating engines. So it's kind of sitting in the space where it's like CIG don't know what to do with it, and it also is missing its tech, and it's just behind on a lot of stuff. So it's like makes me
I
sad
think
because I
CIG
really
are
like
gonna
it.
come back on it when they go through the Hull series, because it seems like they're doing the gold standard of MISC with the Hull series. So I
Mhm.
think they're gonna come back to the other ships when they're done with that. At least that's my feeling. But
I'd hope so.
You know, the
I hope
Starfarer
so
needs it.
because yeah, I love well, especially the Starfarer, yes, but because I love my Tana, but when I'm trying to take a friend with me to gun because it's supposed to have like a turret spot that someone can gun with, it doesn't even have an interface. So I'm
Ooh.
like, just sit in the back. Never
Fine.
mind. So hopefully, yeah, they'll come back to it and take a look at it. That's why I'm holding on to it because it's my baby. I love it. So.
It's a cool ship, and it's like an entry
Yeah.
level kind of ship. Like that's one that
Exactly, yeah.
definitely should be working pretty well. I hope they
Yeah.
come back to that soon. What about you guys?
So for me, I have to agree with the cutter, but more specifically, I'd say that the Corsair has been absolutely, I think it's been a huge success. It's gone through its pipeline relatively smoothly, and it has delivered everything it said it would, and has delivered that in a really succinct and well thought out package. And I think it's one of the most successful Drake designs we've seen, and really fundamentally is at the core what that manufacturer is supposed to be and what it aims to be. And I think as a result of that, that has been one of the most successful ships I've seen so far. One of the least successful, though, I mean, there are lots to choose from. I think I'm going to pick on two. I'm going to pick on the Barney Merchantman because we've just seen that thing change again and again and again and again.
It's
It's,
been rough.
you know, it's got bigger, it's got changed its shape, it's changed its kind of role. It's just been in sort of dev hell basically. And also actually the Carrack. I love my Carrack, I do, but they released it with half its features, and it really only does half of what it's supposed to do. And I have no idea when it's going to come online, and that rankles because I kind of, I don't know, I like having it, but at the same time, I miss having those features. And my one specifically likes to murder people a lot. I mean, a lot. It's called the Event Horizon for a reason. It
Yeah.
literally murders my. It murdered me last night on stream actually, and it just blew up for no reason. Just
It'd be like that.
detonated.
Yeah,
It's
All
like
eight
when
people
you're
of it just died.
it's a feature.
It's like when you're walking on an 890 and you're just by yourself and you're just like, oh, this is a great ship, and you're just by yourself. This is a giant ship, you're just by yourself. There's just no, because there's nothing else to do with it. I mean, you can take
Exactly.
it out and fight, but there's
Yeah.
nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
I have the promise of adventure in this amazing, you know, super long range exploration vessel, but I got nothing to explore right now.
Yeah.
You know.
You know, for me, the Cutter is actually a mixed bag. Like, it's an amazing ship. It's ugly. It's ugly as hell, but it's amazing. Like, it's probably the best starter ship out there because it has everything.
Yeah, little box.
But
Looks like a
that's the
pufferfish.
thing. It's so good that it just makes all the other starters look like shit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where CAG just majorly shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah.
Where they
Yeah.
didn't. They released this new starter. They actually made its starter price, and I think they actually put it in as a game package. I'm not sure. I would have to check, but I know they sold it as a game package when it came out. And now, why would you pick an Aurora over it? Like, it's a good ship, but you know, you have it's got some cargo, it's got a bed, it's nice and big, got some guns. Yeah, but if I had to pick the ship that was the biggest failure for me, and those in the audience who watch my videos, they will already know what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna say the Rock DS, because when they announced that, I was like, why?
Yeah.
Why does this exist?
Yeah.
Why is this abomination in this game? Just why CIG?
It was so bad I forgot about it.
Yeah, that's a really weird one. I still don't
Yeah.
like. I expected them to at some point in the next 6 to 12 months give us a reason for that vehicle, but it's just still doesn't make any sense.
No, I
Mhm.
think the reasoning behind it is that they were doing the pipeline for the Rock, and they couldn't decide which direction to go, so they kind of got into like a near final art on both, on the regular one and the DS. And then they were like, you know what, let's do the regular one. And then a couple months later, they were like, well, we already wasted a couple hours of development time on this, and it's like 10 hours away from being flight ready. So you know what, let's just yeet it in there. And you know what, let's make it worth $70. That'll be fine.
And now they've got another vehicle to keep up to date.
Yeah. Another of many instances of CAG shooting themselves in the foot. But that's just CAG.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Rock DS. Like, if there's one ship in the Star Citizen universe where I was like, why, for what purpose?
Yeah.
Then it was that.
That's a weird one. Loud Guns, what are your picks?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely had the Cutter and the Corsair as my top two, so they've been started. I would agree on the Cutter. I do sort of think though that because it's currently discounted quite heavily, so later on you're going to be more comparing it against like an Avenger Titan, which makes sense to me because it's like the Cutter kind of does everything, but it doesn't do combat. So if you really want to get into this game for the combat side, then you've kind of got that choice to make, don't you?
Yeah. Wouldn't know that from their concept images. They
yeah,
always throw the ship in there fighting.
Everything does combat from the concept images. Yeah. The like maybe a left field one, but the Centurion for me, I actually reckon is a bit of a success, and that's not from a I would buy it from cash perspective. It's I'm really looking forward to it being in the game for credits. Ground vehicles tend to be quite cheap, and actually sort of using those things around like something like Jumptown. So we did a whole testing session with them, and actually ground vehicles, because of their low signatures, heavy firepower before you know you're on them, are actually they were a lot of fun to play with, particularly around something objective based like JT.
And that's a good example of like what Coder you were talking about with the Rock, how they got to the end of the cycle and they were kind of like, okay, we got two versions, let's release them. Like at least with the Atlas platform, there are some very significant differences in how you use those vehicles, and I think they all kind of have a good use for them.
Yeah, I think that's why I love the Atlas platform as this, because they built out basically the chassis, which is just the wheels and the cabin, and then they were like, well, we can build a bunch of stuff with this. And then they were like, okay, let's have the Spartan with the crew cabin, and they were like, well, why can't we just swap out the missiles for some guns, and boom, Centurion. And I think they will actually come back with more variants in the future, because that thing has infinite possibilities, and I love it.
Yeah,
I hope
Like
so.
I always buy it in game because it's just fun, and I can't wait for the Centurion because it was really fun in the PTU.
Centurion is cool. It's a cool vehicle, actually.
Yeah,
it is.
The disappointments for me though sometimes are some of the LTI tokens, like so the hover quad. Really, I found myself looking at the hover quad and I was just kind of like, why do you exist? Except to be a $30 ship with LTI.
Well, but then the X1 did as well.
Like, but then the STV I personally love, so they're not all bad.
That's great. That's a fantastic vehicle. I love the Steve. It was so out of left field too.
So
he calls it by its real name too, the Steve. Okay, there you go.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that.
What is my purpose? You're an LTI token.
Well, it's also the variety is nice. I was talking to Astropub about this the other day, and like having redundancy in vehicles is nice. I don't know if it's necessarily something that we would want right now when, clearly there are necessary vehicles we need, but having a vehicle that is literally just, oh, I like that just because it looks different from that one, is pretty nice. For me, it's a ship that somebody mentioned in the chat. The MSR is a weird one, because it was kind of the first ship that it felt like they really went hard on making sure it was like detailed. It was a step up in their development kind of like quality levels. It had the locks, it had the light switches, and it felt a lot better. But then at the same time, it also suffered really heavily from what you talked about, Coder, which was that they concepted it to be something amazing that people loved, and then when they finally got around to having to make it, they had to make some pretty significant changes with it that really haven't aged well.
It's not just that, with the MSR, they really went hard on the detail for Crusader, because I think it was the first Crusader ship out there.
Yeah.
And they really, really went hard on detail, and I think they forgot to, step back and just look at the general functionality of that ship. Because I think someone mentioned it in chat, like the layout of the MSR is horrible. And then you, for some reason, have an elevator in the cargo hold that goes 2 meters up instead of having stairs or having the elevator go all the way down to the ground. I think actually the amount of that was given about that elevator actually forced the Hercules to have an elevator that goes all the way down.
Which
I
is
think that's the
nice.
only reason we have that, which is nice.
It's a good
Eventually,
feature to
we
have.
bitch loud enough for CIG to actually do something. But I think eventually the MSR, like I love my MSR. I have an MSR. I haven't gotten rid of it. I love it. It's a great ship.
Yeah.
But I think eventually CIG will have to, once they're somewhat satisfied with their Crusader pipeline, and at this point I think they're pretty well into it. You know, they have a small fighter, they have a large ship. I think they will have to come back to the MSR, redo the layout completely.
Yeah.
And there's actually a lot of wasted space in the MSR, and that's a problem with many other ships. That's fine. Like the 600i, for example, it's 75% wasted space.
Do you think they're
So
going to get rid of the crawl spaces?
I mean, they were in the original concept, but there's no use for them right now. But I think they're gonna stay.
I think
Feels a little.
I think they
I
could
don't know, is it-
do like component and relay access down there, and it would make some sense.
That would make
Yeah.
sense, yeah.
Just
And I mean, like,
smuggling
okay, like put some hidden cargo in there. It's fine. Like the crawl space can stay, but it's more like the general layout and the elevator. That it's just kind of like little things that are sort of like first steps on the design that were just completely disregarded. Like if you know when you look at the interior layout of the MSR, where you enter, you have the server room, and then you go to the side, and that's where the turrets are. If you flip this around, it makes perfect sense. Like if you just put the elevator on the other side of the cargo hold, where if you enter, you know, the upper deck, you enter the turrets, then you have the crew area instead of having the servers and the scanner room
Mhm.
at the same, you know, and that place.
Yeah.
Just turn it around, like put the
There's-
elevator on the other side. That's it.
There's some stuff they could do with that ship. I want to go back to what you were saying about the cutter, though. This is, I think, is a really important topic that I haven't really seen talked about too much. But like, is power creep beginning to become a problem with, especially the starter ships? If the cutter and lab guns, you said that it was discounted. I don't know how much the cutter is supposed to be normally, but if
I checked, it's $72. So it
72.
is Avenger size. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. So then, yeah, it's definitely got a step up on the other starters in terms of like usefulness. But do you think as they keep introducing new ships, is there a potential problem that we could see with power creep? Have you guys noticed that in any other ways besides that ship?
There's always a problem with balance, isn't there? The more,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like it felt quite bad at the time, but I'm actually really glad that they took those steps to like bring back the components and the weapons to level. Because when you've got so many different ships and then you add different weapons and stuff on top of it, it is a balancing nightmare, and you're always gonna have outliers. Spent quite a lot of time playing mobbers like League of Legends, and it just happens in that sort of game. You know, every patch you just get a different S to C tier. There's always a champion that's an outlier that they forgot about and they didn't tune right. So
I think we're seeing it a lot more in the combat side, because the combat side of Star Citizen's gameplay loop is probably the most refined right now and has the most dedicated ships for it. And I think you're seeing that some of the newer fighters or some of the newer entries to that have made others obsolete. So the Saber and the F7C, I think, are two very underperforming fighters right now. And they just have other things have come out that are just better, do its job better, and they just are in a bad place. So I think it's absolutely something that is going to have to be very consciously looked at. And I really, really hope that CIG is going to stick to their mission statement of tons of different ships that all can do, you know, that may be in the same role and the same area, but they all do things a little bit, some things a bit better and some things a little worse.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's all about flavor of doing a job rather than this ship is objectively better than this ship, you know?
Yeah.
Because I don't like metas if I can avoid them.
Yeah.
Because it takes away my choice. You know?
And the
I mean,
features
you know,
that they
the
bring in.
Aurora is more stealthy than the Saber right now.
Oh,
that
that's ridiculous.
that grinds my gears.
That is ridiculous.
Sneaky boy Aurora,
Oh my goodness.
the ultimate military infiltrator.
Like, I'm sorry, the Aurora is the ultimate ship. It's, you know, it's small, compact, has a little bit of cargo space. There's surprisingly a lot of guns on it. If you have the Legionnaire, it has a lot of missiles. It can apparently take a punch. Also, it is completely outdated. So nothing's gonna break on it because it uses all the old tech. Like it's the ultimate ship,
Okay,
and
make
it's
a convincing
stealthy.
argument.
I'm a very convincing person, and yet people don't believe me most of the time.
That's why we have you on here.
Oh, I thought it was for the snacks. Oh wait, there are no
the
snacks.
snacks, the snacks, and the cutter love.
Yes, yes. That.
Another question I had, and this is one that we've kind of danced around a little bit during this show. How do you guys feel about ships being introduced in order to bring in features? I think it happens in different ways. Sometimes you see a ship that's been around for a while, like, I don't know, the Caterpillar or anything else that has been deemed as modular. And then out of nowhere, CIG is like, hey, we're going to bring in this ship that brings in this gameplay that you've been waiting for on those ships. But hold on, we got another ship to introduce it with. This is also something that I think we are possibly going to see with let's see, what else do they have the opportunity to do this with? I mean, the cargo refactor, it kind of felt like they were hoping to do that with the raft instead of say something like the hull series or something like that. But how do you feel about ships being brought in to introduce features rather than those features being introduced and just added to the ships?
It was definitely cooler, right? Like I think when
Yeah.
salvage comes out, and assuming salvage comes out, and the vulture's gonna go out with it, obviously. That's gonna be great. Everybody's gonna be buying vultures left and right because it's the cool new gameplay. And as you know how CIG do balancing of new gameplay loops for economy. They're just gonna make it insanely profitable, and they're just gonna nerf everything else. Like mining's gonna be irrelevant again. And on the other hand, it would be very uncool if it doesn't make it into 380 in the salvage, and the vulture is gonna make it. And then we have a vulture which is not particularly useful without salvage. I think it has a little bit of cargo space, but that's about it.
Yeah.
And then you would have to wait another quarter or one patch cycle for that gameplay to come in. And I think that would take away a little bit of the hype. Some people would be upset. And then we can also look at other gameplay loops. Like we can look at refining, which is the Starfare. The Starfare has been around forever, and there's still no fuel refining. You can't even. It has fuel scoops, and they work. Fuel scoops works in Star Citizen. Have been working for years, and it can't even transfer that scooped hydrogen into the tanks in the back to refuel ships with, which is technically its primary purpose, at least for the civilian variant. So I think at the same time that introduction of that gameplay is going to bring in a lot of hype, especially when they kind of bring it out of nowhere as they like to do with some things. But I think it's very much depending on the ship and the gameplay and how many people have the ship and stuff. I think the big things like modularity, that's going to just be a huge wave of hype when that comes out, if it ever comes out. I actually don't know what the problem with modularity is, because technically they can treat the modules as components. It's going to work with their internal component system that I definitely do not know much about from looking at the files or anything. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, I was excited for the Retaliator getting its modules eventually, and then they just kind of went radio silent on that. And I was like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they did it with the Caterpillar, then they did it with the Retaliator, and now they're probably going to do it again with the Galaxy. Let's be candid with each other, gentlemen. It's probably going to be the same. I'm in the position to where if CIG starts to prove to me that they are actually going to suggest ships that go alongside of gameplay loops and then actually bring those ships out with those gameplay loops, I'll be more inclined to be like, get hyped about it and excited. Like, okay, this is a good thing because, hey, this is our starship for this particular star piece of gameplay, and this is one that directly, works with it. But like as Kurt was saying with the Vulture and 318, with this, tier 0 salvage. Failing that, then I don't want them to do that. I just I don't know. It's complicated. There's been a lot of, hey, here's a cool ship, and then it's delayed now, and we're not going to see the gameplay for it. Oh, here's a cool functionality. Here's a cool ship that's going to make use of this functionality. Oh, okay, it's going to be delayed now.
Yeah, to follow up on that, they do this. Here's a cool ship. Here's a cool feature, and they do this at the onset of that, like when they are comfortable with announcing it, which is usually very early in development on a lot of things. And then they actually start working on it like, oh shit, there's a blocker. There's a million blockers on this. We are never going to be able to do this with how we're right now.
Right.
and then they just kind of go quiet on it, and they hope everybody forgets.
You don't
Yeah.
But
forget.
the Spectrum
I think-
never forgets.
Yeah, Spectrum never forgets.
I think
No, no.
almost to sort of play devil's advocate on it though. Sometimes, and I've got no experience in developing computer games, so I might be way off the mark. But I do think sometimes you do have to admit you maybe bit off more than you could chew
Oh
with
yeah,
some of your concepts. And
The
so I look at something
story of
like the
Star Citizen.
Endeavor and like all the potential combinations you could have of that, or something even like the Caterpillar. Like if you've got 4 slots for modules, that's a lot of variability. And so maybe sometimes introducing something which is a much simpler application of it, like the Galaxy is just one big room which switches out for 3 different options. Maybe it's just a case of doing something easier to
Yeah.
start with.
Mm.
And we haven't actually heard the follow up to the ship design team guys comment that they were getting closer on modularity. So maybe they will follow up with the Retaliator. Maybe he wasn't
Maybe.
talking about the Galaxy.
Maybe. I think you really nailed something there. Biting off more than you can chew feels like the absolute definition of Star Citizen. Because from my perspective, what I see is that they proposed an amazing game, got a ton of funding for it, expanded that game into something that they think would be even better, and then slowly started to realize they're like, oh my gosh, we have to fund this. Like we made a lot of money, but then we promised a lot of stuff, and we gotta somehow fund that stuff that we promised. So they started bringing out ships, and as they bring out those ships, they realize they need to make those ships enticing, and they add features for those ships, and then they have to introduce new ships to fund those features, and they kind of got into this whole scenario of biting off a lot of game that maybe, because I think that Star Citizen would have eventually made it to where it is now, but they kind of like catapulted it up there, right? And now it feels like they need to really bring in the ships to make that funding work.
It feels like we're crossing a bridge, or we're building a bridge, I should say, and we're putting the planks in front of us as we go, and then taking the ones behind us, taking them out, and putting them in front of us as we go, and just like, okay, let's just see how far we can get with this.
Like having been working in corporate software development for many years now, Tomato, you know, I can say that is very much the case everywhere, and it's probably the case with CAG, where you have the big meeting with the customer, which in this case is us, the backers, and you promise a lot of things, and you get a lot of money to do it, and then you sit down, the marketing people and the managers, they sit down with the developers, and they're like, so here's what we promised, and we will do. And the developer, the senior developer, he's just gonna take his cup of coffee, he's gonna pull out a little bottle, he's gonna pour some alcohol, and it's like, you guys, what? and how do you propose we do that? And you know what? Never mind the how. Just tell me when. And the manager is gonna like look into his notes. He's gonna look into his little notebook. He's like, oh, in 2 months. It's like, do you idiots ever think about this?
This was the conversation around server meshing.
Yeah, and then he just pours the rest of the little bottle of alcohol into his coffee, where it's mostly alcohol at that point. He's like, he takes a big gulp. And he's like, fine, we'll do it. And that's what Star Citizen, because eventually they will say, fine, we will do it.
Yeah,
And they will.
And that's the thing, is it's whatever angle you want to come at it from, but that's the position they're in. Some people believe they can do it, some people believe they can't, and we've seen very actively over the years that they can't do certain things, but they're putting in the R&D to figure out how to. And that's like what a lot of the delays are. That's why iCache turned into the entity graph. That's why server meshing added the replication layer. It's why a lot of these things happen, because they get to a point where they're like, okay, this is really difficult. We've got to come up with a way to do this that works with the systems we already have, but we've got to fund that. And I think that that's really what they keep struggling with, and hopefully what starts to be a little bit easier as we get more of these core tech features into the game, and especially once Squadron 42 Episode 1 somehow comes out. But yeah, I mean, it all comes down to, really, do you think that they can figure these things out in a timely manner? And timely is a weird word because we're 10 years in, but in a timely manner, in that, like, they're not going to run out of money before they can brute force it? Or do you think that they're just in hot water and they're not going to be able to make it happen? I don't know. That's the way I see it. And
Hmm.
I think the ship development pipeline is the backbone of whether or not that happens. And that's why I think these are good talks to have. And I think why a lot of people are very concerned about ships and how they work, because the game lives or dies on how well CIG can present these ships and make them function
Yeah.
in the game.
I mean, the thing is, CIG has a lot of very talented people working for them. Like they have a lot of very, very good developers, and there's a lot of talent in there. And having worked with a lot of very talented people, I can tell you that any problem has a solution. It's how long it's going to take you and how much is it going to cost at the end of the day. But every problem can be solved, and I fully believe that CIG can solve most of the blockers they have. But I also think that they are dragging this giant boulder chained to their leg, which is management. Because they have, how many times they have reformed their development at
Oy.
this point in the last 5 years?
Like
3 or 4 times?
3 major times, yeah.
Yeah, like 3 or 4 times when they like reshuffled the entire development of the game. And they still haven't fixed the fundamental issue, which is that you have all these teams working on many different things. And this is inevitable in software development, especially on a project this size. You're going to have a lot of overlap in what they do. And not just overlap, you're going to have a lot of dependencies. Like this is going to be blocking that, this is going to be a prerequisite for this, and it's going to be back and forth for weeks before you plan a thing.
Mhm.
So yes, I get it, but there is probably a way to switch that up a little bit. I'm not sure, to what extent CIG or, at what levels they're doing what things in management, but I'm pretty sure there is a better way to do it. Maybe, I don't know. I would have to
Yeah.
physically force my way into the studio and ask people to figure it
Just
out.
might not go well.
Yeah, but they probably wouldn't be very happy about it. But maybe if I come in with my laptop and be like, you know what, just give me a desk and I will do some stuff. And then, maybe they'll be a little more amicable to me doing that. Who knows?
Give this man a desk.
Like,
I think
literally,
he wants desk, boys.
no, my whole thing,
Just
like
in
I
the
say this
corner.
every time I'm on the captain's table, like CIG, because CIG is very anti-data mining. They don't like it. They don't like us to do it. They will never say it because most of the popular tools are data mining based. But they will never say, but they think it privately. And I'm saying, CIG, just give us a API to do it, and we will stop. We will stop data mining your game if you give us an API that will give us the same information. Hell, CIG, if you give me a desk and a crate of beer, I'm going to write it myself. Literally, all I need. Just
That's
hire me.
honestly not a huge sign-on bonus. Like I'd do it. Some beer, that's not bad.
Literally, give me
Yeah.
a desk and some beer. That's it. I'm going to do it. Like, give me
Community's
desk,
been
beer, and free
asking
lunch.
for community's been asking for API, like the ability to set up an API like for like ever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It would make everyone's life like infinitely easier, but so far they're just kind of like just kind of been radio silent on it.
I mean, to be fair, it would take some development time and development effort from the actual game. Plus, it depends on like the underlying data structure of the game, which is still evolving. So it would just carry a lot of technical debt. But once we move into kind of that no longer iCache persistent storage because we threw out iCache that they're working on, that's going to be coming with server meshing and persistent entity streaming. At that point, I think the data model is going to be more or less safe. Not safe, but stable. And they would be able to expose that to the backers because, in my understanding, that storage is going to bring all the information into one place, which would be nice if they let us use that somehow. But that also brings a bunch of other issues. Again, CAG, if you're listening, desk and a case of beer and maybe a slight increase of my current salary. Like maybe.
Well, there's a big demand, I think, from like just from what you're saying, from what people talk about, like from things like Game Glass to um, services like the
Yeah.
Armory or navigation tools or trading like there's a lot of stuff that people are going to be able to benefit from being able to have a little bit better connection to the data in the game. So yeah, hopefully that does come about. Like
Yeah, I think the big concern there for CAG is that they don't want people to have all the information, which is
That's fair.
great, but it's not going to stop us from getting all the information. Like, if you're not going to give me all the information and you're only going to give me one chunk of the information, you're going to give the next guy the other chunk.
There's
And
going to
eventually,
be
I'm going to just collect, information from 1,000 people, and I'm going to have the whole thing. So just save me the effort,
I mean,
save me
people
some
spend
time.
people spend their entire weekend just like shooting each other with lasers just to get to kind of guesstimate what the actual damage number values will be, even if they can't data mine it. Like, yeah, exactly. People are going to spend hours trying to, figure out what is the best, so to speak, or what is going to be the data points behind certain elements and stuff like that. And it's, trying to put the stop gaps in front of it, I think, can only do so much. When at the end of the day,
Yeah.
people are just determined enough. When they love a game so much, they are going to find a way.
But that kind
That's the
of
problem with passion.
adds to the game, right? If you have the dedicated groups of people who can create tangible, useful information that is very hard to get, suddenly that is an in-game advantage or something that you might be able to barter with. So I can see how, like, both sides, you want to have some level of with withholding information just so that it adds to the game, but at the same time it's nice to be able to easily create these services for the players. So that I can see that being an ongoing conversation for a while.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of back and forth, and there's security and data issues, and it's all solvable with a little bit of thinking, a little bit of effort, because this is a very common thing for companies. This is what I do for a living. So for me, this is a very easy problem to fix or to solve.
Mhm.
So CIG, if you're listening, you have my email.
Well, I have one more question that I want to finish this off with you guys, and then we're going to drop into a little QA session. Got a couple questions for you guys lined up from the audience, but just to finish things off, we've gone over the goods and the bads of the ships today, and made it pretty clear that, like, these ships are crucial, they're important, they fund the game, they drive a lot of features, they make people excited, but they also tend to be a bit of a drag on development at times. They obviously are creating some tech debt, and just looking into the future, they're going to cause a lot of frustration making sure things are up to date or not. What is the problem that you see, though? The most important problem that you see with this ship development, with the pipeline, with the way they release it, the way they market it? What's that one thing that you gravitate towards? And what is a possible solution that you see for that problem? We'll start with you, Loken.
So for me, when it comes to the biggest problem with the development pipeline right now, I think it's two major issues. Is first, I think there is still a lot of I think there are a lot. There's actually quite a lack of education for people and backers to truly understand what actually goes into the creation of a ship, and that creates unrealistic expectations of when that ship should be released and come out. And these ships can take a long time through art, into concept, concept into art, and art into white box, gray box, and then final release. I think there's that issue there, lack of sort of public education, so people can truly understand the level of commitment and effort that this happens. But also, I think there is an issue of there just seems to be a greater throughput of concepts ships going in, and there seems to be a trickle coming out at the other end. And I've seen so many ships that have been announced in concepts. I bought into a few of them, and yet I don't know if I'm ever going to see them, because so few seem to actually make it through that pipeline to release. So the solution I see personally is I would like to see them. I think it just goes back to an earlier point about a lot of these ships being hung up over particular implementations of technology and gameplay loops and cycles and bits and pieces that need to come in to allow these ships to exist. I would like to suggest that, again, going to what Coda was saying, every problem has a solution. It just depends on how much time it's going to take to create that solution. I feel that CIG in the meantime could come down and compromise on some of these things. And to go on what Loudguns was saying about, why not with the Galaxy just have 3 variants of it with each module inside of it that can't be switched out yet as a stopgap measure, so that when you do have the modularity, you can take those out and just consolidate it into one modular ship, and just have that as a stopgap. Or with my Carrack, for example, again, I use that as an example. I have the ship, I can fly it. Does it do everything yet? No, but at least I have it. At least I can use it, and that's better than the poor buggers out there with Apollo Medivacs, for example. I mean, we just had the Pisces Medi ship come out, and that technically is the same kind of deal. I get that they haven't released the Medivac because it hasn't got you can't switch out the beds yet. Well, that's okay. Why not just have 2 variants for the short term the two different bed types, and then again consolidate it later once that technology comes in. It might, that would be my suggestion. Now, there's obviously problems with my suggestion, but that's where I'm at.
I have a question then. As an example, the Orion. Would you be worried about them bringing the Orion into game right now if they didn't
think-
have the actual mining ready?
Yes, I think so, because I think that you need to take into consideration the examples. So, to expand on what I was saying, so the examples I've given are ships that actually already have a pre-existing gameplay loop that is actually in the game
Okay.
and is relatively well established, and as
Yeah.
a result, it's fair to have an approximation. Whereas the Orion, again, Loud Gods was saying earlier on, we don't know how the Orion's supposed to actually mine things. This thing's supposed to be gobble up entire asteroid fields, not just singular things. And because that gameplay doesn't exist in any capacity, I think that would be a bit too far.
Yeah. This might be controversial as a miner, but I'd actually be worried about them introducing the Orion into game right now with all of its gameplay features. Because if you bring something in like that, which, how long would it take with something Orion sized to be able to buy every ship for credits in game? It's too big for Stanton
Yes.
in a
That's fair.
way. And so and unfortunately, if you go out and you buy every single ship with credits, then that is one key driver for players to keep playing the game, which you've just taken away.
So there's some nuance to it. It's not just a put in the concept ships. Like there are reasons for each ship.
There has for me personally, if the gameplay loop exists even in its earliest iteration, then I'd say it would be fair to bring in a ship that may not have all of its functionality online yet, but enough to where it makes sense within the game. So again, the Apollo Medivac, we've got medical, we've got a decent approximation medical. Bring the Apollo Medivac in.
Absolutely.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if it's a big ship like a capital vessel, or the gameplay just does not exist yet, then keep those on the table because there's no reason for it to exist in the game yet.
Hybrid, how about you?
Yeah, I think like one of the things that we look at when we look at the concepts, and one of the bigger criticisms I think a lot of people have, including myself, is that like, what is the actual, like, where realistically in the timeline we can expect this ship that's been announced? So we know now that a lot of the bigger ships are not really going to be seen in the game until they get server meshing in, and of course more star systems, for example, like Pyro. And well, we understand that timeline intuitively could mean anywhere between now and another 4 or 5 years. Who knows? We don't know. We only know exactly what they just told us now. But when it comes to like smaller ships, we don't really get that kind of timeline. We don't really understand where it's going to fit in unless, for example, it's missing a gameplay element. Then we have to wait for when the gameplay element gets on the roadmap, I guess. And then that's when we kind of know it's maybe going to come in. Like the Legionary we were talking about earlier, right? That seems like a relatively simple ship to put together. It's just missing the hacking gameplay, which was taken off. So now, when is that ship going to come in? Well, I guess maybe when hacking comes in, but then we have docking, so I think that's taken care of.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it kind of makes it tricky trying to figure out where things fall. And if I were to basically try to provide some, I guess, critique or some feedback, it would be that trying to explain where realistically these ships could come in may be useful, but I know some people would be like that. They probably would never do that because it might be bad for getting more ship sales, I guess you could say. Because if you're saying this, we have this new capital ship that just came out. By the way, we need it for server meshing, and that could be years down the line. So keep that in mind. If people are going to be like, probably not going to spend my money on it then. So there's a juggling act that has to go into it. But I mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind, at least for me, is the timelines. If it were me personally, I would love to be more transparent about those timelines, about where we could potentially realistically see that.
Yeah. Do you feel like by leaving that sort of information out, they're being a little disingenuous? Because as Loken said, like the actual public knowledge of how to expect these things is not very easy to come by.
I can see the argument for that. I think the reason why they don't, of course, like we could argue again, like you said, is the financial reasons. And they, of course, need backers to help finance the project and to move things along. So there's definitely an argument there. I'm not sure I subscribe to that per se. I think it's more or less just this is kind of the way they've always done things.
Mm-hmm.
And they could definitely do more to improve. And we've always said that for years. There's always more they can improve, and they take our feedback and they move with it. And for me personally, that would be my feedback is, hey, let's get some realistic timelines. It doesn't have to be a date. We know you, CAG, we know you guys are adverse to dates. And that's
But
perfectly
also
fine.
addicted.
Yeah, we're also addicted, but you know, at least give us some crumb. You know, give us some crumbs. Like, let us know what's going on here. When can we expect this? You know,
Mhm.
what's the realistic timeline? When can I get this? You know.
That's fair. Coder, how about yourself?
So I think the ship pipeline, especially with the concept ship, that there are two issues that I see. One is that even though we have come a very long way with the ship pipeline, feels like it's very early stages where they seem to be getting hung up on things quite often, and then they have to switch focus. Even though, like, we know that they have multiple ships in the pipeline, we know this, but there's still, multiple teams working. There's the art team, there's the vehicle programming team, and then I think some gameplay team takes some effort in there as well. So these guys still need to, especially with all the reorganization every once in a while, they have to learn how to work together, how to optimize the pipeline, and this takes time. And that's okay. They will learn eventually, right? And the second thing is kind of, I think everyone alluded to it a little bit with the communication on concepts. And what I said earlier, that some of the larger ships for some of the less populated manufacturers, they might not have the design language ready. They might not have some of the base components ready. Like when you think about it, the C8R is just the ripped out pieces of the Carrack medbay put into a Pisces. There was very little model work done on it. I think there's shortening the little medical station. That's all that was done in there. Might even not that, because I think the model is split at that point in the Carrack, but whatever. So they have all this prep work to do for a lot of the ships, and this is just going to take so much time. So I think my advice on how to fix this: one, start small. Like, refine, small details, have reusable pieces for manufacturers. Because when you think about it in cars in real life, isn't it like, most of the cars have literally the same parts because they are made by the same companies?
Yeah.
So I think CAG could do something similar along those lines with ships. Sure, you would lose a lot of the uniqueness, but let's be honest, it's a standardized format of a vehicle. You can't really be that unique. Like,
Oh, they
yes,
try.
cars look, they try. Like, cars look different, but the basic operation of a car is the same everywhere. Like, you look in front of your steering, that's where your dials are going to be on 95% of cars. Looking at you, Drake, with your MFD on the floor on the Corsair.
Well, that's the thing, is a lot of these ships have very like small custom things. Like, I was surprised that they put those window visors on the cutter. Like,
Yeah,
those
that was
sorts
really
of
nice. I like
things
that.
is like, are you guys gonna do that for every ship? Like, how is that how does that work in the long term?
Yeah, I kind of got derailed there, but so I think they should, start small, refine the design language, refine because I think they have a slightly different pipeline for each manufacturer
Mhm.
or each type of ship, so that once they refine this, they can move on to bigger things, and then I think that's gonna smooth things out. And then what I mentioned earlier, where when the concept team, they come out with a shiny new concept, and the marketing team, they just gobble it up and like, oh yes, we're gonna publish this immediately, right now, like put this up on Twitter immediately, like right now. Don't even proofread the text, just goes right on the website.
Mhm.
Slow the down, CAG, please.
And
Show the concepts, be like, okay, here's a new concept ship, this is what it roughly does. We're gonna come back to this when it goes into the pipeline. And then it goes into the pipeline, goes through the white box, is like, okay, we did a little bit more work. This is what the interior is gonna look like. Here's some white box pictures. Here's what it's gonna do. That's it. And now you can buy it. And you can make a more informed choice
okay.
on whether to buy it or not. Which I think is why a lot of people are salty about concept sales, which is like, we are expected to make a choice on buying a thing that is very expensive, and it might be the only opportunity to get it with this very prized LTI that, by the way, nobody knows how it's going to work. Just FYI. And yet we're all trying to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And CAG just doesn't give us this information to make that
Yeah,
choice.
I mean, insurance, holy crap. Don't even get started on like the fact
Yeah,
that
LTI
insurance is
yeah.
such a crucial part of buying these
Yeah.
ships, and it's not even a fleshed out thing.
Yeah. This LTI thing is very funny, and I try not to think about it.
It's the best way.
It's the
Yeah.
best way. Ignorance is a bliss.
I don't
think
even place importance on insurance. Like if something has 10 months of insurance, cool. I don't care. I'll make enough money to pay it in the game at some point. Like trying to understand or quantify how insurance is going to change your purchasing of a ship is just way too deep.
Yeah.
As somebody
It's
who's been here for
artificial
like 8
scarcity.
years. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a form of artificial scarcity. So it's like, we always tell our guys in our org, the new guys who are newer players, we say like, hey, if you guys are gonna get new ships, don't put so much emphasis on LTI. All right. At the end of the day, you're part of
Absolutely.
an organization. We got you covered. If you need something, we got you.
Yeah.
But we don't know anything about insurance. Don't waste your money on it. I don't want to say waste because some people really, really want it. But at the end of the day, like, don't put the heavy emphasis on it. Don't try to. You don't have to do all the CCU games and all that if you don't want to. If you see it now and it only has 6 months of insurance, just get it now. Why are you gonna go and try to play this convoluted game? Just get it now. Don't worry about it. We don't know
Yeah.
anything about insurance enough for it to matter right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, I
They
think
need to-
the whole insurance thing went overboard when, the Star Jump created an app that's gonna tell you how to do a CCU chain to get the ship that you want. That's where I realized that we might have gone too far.
Yeah, they've definitely gone too far with that stuff, and I really, it's very annoying. But Loud Guns, please, what is the problem you see and potential solution?
The best part about going last and everybody being so comprehensive is you tend to cover it all off for me. I think the one thing which slightly gets me, and I think the first time it left like a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth was I remember seeing an email for the last chance to get the Perseus when they sort of did an announcement on a Perseus, and so I don't personally have a problem with when my concept ships come out, or like what ship comes out before which other one, because I'm kind of hyper aware of everything I don't know. Like I'm not from this background, and I'm just of the belief that if CIG aren't rushing my ship out the door, they've got a good reason. The one thing I'd ask back from them in exchange for that understanding is, could you not rush people's credit cards out of their wallets with sort of this fake FOMO? Because I'm
Yes.
sorry, it's not the last chance to get hold of a Perseus. That Perseus is going on sale twice every year. You know it. I know it. So stop saying last chance to get until it is the last chance to get, and you're going to stop ship sales on X date.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the little things like that. I don't remember if it was the Perseus per se, but I do remember them doing another really kind of like just not, I don't know how to describe it. Just not a good look sort of email that they blasted out to kind of entice people into buying stuff. And I'm like, if people want to come in and start spending money to support the game, so be it. But like, you guys got to pick and choose when you're asking for this kind of stuff and sending out emails for a ship that's like multiple hundreds of dollars like that. And then telling people, like you said, it's your last chance to get it. Make sure to jump in and buy. It's like, don't do that, please. I agree. I think you guys all sort of wrapped up the things that I see as well. I mean, honestly, the communication is a big one. Loken and Hybrid, you guys really stuck into that. Teaching players what the heck is going on in this game. I mean, heck, we don't even have tutorials. Like, people don't know how to get out of bed when they start the game. They can't even get up onto
Wasn't there
their
a
feet.
ticket for like first 30 minutes of player experience improvement?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
luckily
whatever
they're
happened to
working
that?
on it.
Yeah.
They're working on the new player
Yeah.
experience. I think things like the new scanning and FPS and how they label the interaction and stuff is
Yeah.
going to help a ton. But like, when we're still trying to teach people how to play the game, how are you going to expect people to navigate this store on a website that's not even called Star Citizen and trying to go into ship sales and all this stuff? And like,
Yeah.
the communication on that front really needs to improve and get people's expectations in line with what you're doing with these ships. When is the ship actually coming out? When is the gameplay actually being worked on? If you don't know, say you don't know. Of course, they never will. But like, I'm in agreement with you guys on that, and I think that the ship sales aren't going anywhere. I used to hope that we would see them end once the game went to live. At this point, I don't believe that's the case anymore. I think we could still see them limiting the ships to maybe just like some of the entry level or starter ships, $100 and less kind of things. Um, and I also worry about concept sales after the game goes live, because I think that if they were going to do that, their best option would be to say, hey, you can buy and support this ship. It'll come out in 2 patches, but once it does come out, everybody else can get it as well. Like, doing stuff like that, I think, is a good way for them to sort of split the gap on being just overboard in terms of this stuff and also just cutting it off. But from what I gather here, just talking with you guys, there are clearly a lot of small things that they could be doing to improve their practices and the things that surround these ships. But I'd like to thank you all again for joining me today. This is a great discussion. I was really hoping to hit both sides of this. You know, we all know that these ships are cool. We love them. We want to see more of them. We want to see them do well. But at the same time, like, it is a tough subject to follow if you're a Star Citizen fan. And I think there are problems to be talked about. I think there's praise to be given. There's no other game with ships like this. And there's no other game with ship sales like this. So thank you for joining me today. Were there any other thoughts or comments or anything that you guys wanted to get out before we finished up?
I have one off topic, which is shout out to the recruiter who figured out my LinkedIn from watching the stream.
Wow. Well, there you go.
I'm literally reading a message on my LinkedIn like, hello, Samuel. I'm watching the show you're on right now. We would like to offer you a job. But
The question is it CIG?
It's not CIG.
Do I get any commission on that hire?
I'm gonna negotiate. We're gonna figure it out.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. Pretty solid. Did anybody else have something that they wanted to get out before we?
Yeah, I did have one thing. Whilst I obviously I try my very best to remain as neutral as I can, and I don't want to appear as a Cloud Imperium White Knight, nor do I want to be a complete naysayer. All I'm going to say is that it's really, really important to always underpin and remind people that we are watching the development at a forensically detailed level every single step of the way in a very transparent situation, which 9 times out of 10, 99% of the time, you don't see. You do not see this with other games. You do not see it with Grand Theft Auto. You don't see it with Red Dead Redemption. You don't see it with anything.
Yeah.
This is very different. And as a result, we do get to see a lot of the mistakes that usually are in-house, and a lot of the fumbles and the tech mistakes and the, we can't do this. We have to do it in different ways. And just to remind people of that, that's all. Yes, we can, it's important we converse about it, and it's important that we critique it and we talk about this stuff in open lobbies and forums. But also, I'm not saying give them all the leeway and rope that they could possibly ever want so they can strangle themselves, but just remember that we are watching what would be, again, like I said, behind closed doors. And it's actually, in a lot of ways, a privilege, because we may actually be able to, as a result, affect change at a far more fundamental level than other backers for other games or other players of other games.
Yeah, and it is
Absolutely.
an absurd game they're trying to make. I mean, if they were,
yeah.
if they were going in and making like a city builder, not to say that city builders aren't hard, because God, I love myself some Civ, but like if they were going in and trying to make a city builder with like a normal amount of scale, I would be absolutely just through the roof with frustration if it was taking them this long to get more of these basics down. But I do understand that the differences that this game has from some others, and I think there are plenty of problems to focus on, no doubt. Like you said, there's a lot of nuance and opinions to be had about this. Like you don't want to be 100% for or against, or cheering it on or knocking it down. There are mistakes that are being made, and that's pretty clear. But there's also a pretty cool game that's being made, and it's hard to not also acknowledge that.
I think they succeeded more than they failed. That's for sure. It wouldn't be this far down the pipeline if they hadn't.
Yeah. The fact that they've even lasted 10 years is pretty good. All right, guys. Well, one last time, I'm going to let you go through the list real quick and just let people know where they can find you, and then we are going to wrap things up here and do a quick Q&A with everyone who's here live with us. So, Loken, go ahead and throw out the links.
So if you want to catch me, I'm live on Twitch 4 days a week, Tuesday through Friday, and you can find me at twitch.tv/LokenPlays. You can also find me on YouTube at LokenPlays as well, and all the branding's the same. You'll see I'm very easy to find. I'm also on TikTok and on Twitter, again, at LokenPlays.
Yeah, and Hybrid V, literally just only on YouTube right now at Hybrid V Audio. So if you want to check out some cool videos where I go around and try to change out the audio soundscape of Star Citizen, by all means, come and check it out. Or if you need some tutorial and guidance, it's also there for you as well. So I'll see you all there.
Coder.
Oh, it's my turn. You can find me on YouTube as TheSpaceCoder. I do videos once or twice a week, depending on how much overtime I'm doing at work. And if you're looking for some help with finding gear for your character in Star Citizen, go to the armory.thespacecoder.space, where you will find all the stats, almost all the pictures, and all the sale locations or where to loot stuff. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Yep. So also just find me on YouTube under Loud Guns, and it's basically whatever I found most interesting that week. That's the way I try to put together my content schedule. But got a bit of everything, some guides and some random theory crafting. So come on by.
Cool. Well, thank you guys again. And I am Space Tomato. You might not know who I am. Thanks for coming and watching this if you do. But I do YouTube. I've got 2 YouTube channels, mostly surrounding Star Citizen, but I look into other sci-fi games as well. I stream on Twitch. Really just searching Space Tomato anywhere will help you find me. And if you want to help support all of that stuff or jump into these podcasts live, because some of them are actually done offline, you can become a YouTube channel member or a Patreon member, and I do exclusive videos every month for those people as well. So that's my gig. And I would like to thank you all, whether you're listening to this on your audio platform of choice, which has no ads, or you're watching this on the YouTube channel. Thank you so much for sticking around. Honestly, if you're still watching this on YouTube, leave a comment. Let me know. Hit up the timestamp and let us know how we did. But I'd like to thank you again one last time for joining us today, and I'll see you all next month.